I'm your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW, EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 115 of the Future Template Parent Podcast. Thank you, as always, for listening. I'm your host, Dr. Carolyn Solo, PhD, LICSW, EMDR consultant, EMDR intensive therapist, coach for therapists, and mom of 3 daughters. Today, I want to talk about something really practical that I get a lot of questions about, but that's also very important. And that is, what about paperwork and documentation for intensives? What paperwork do I use for intensives, and how is it different from what you might be using right now? And how do I document my intensive sessions? How do I set it up in my electronic medical record? I use Jane. I want you to be sure that you're covered legally and practically, as well as prepared clinically for your intensive when that client walks in the door, right? So paperwork and documentation is an important part of that. So I'm going to talk you through all of the paperwork that I use and how I use my electronic medical record, Jane, to support me with all of this, because I know it can feel overwhelming to keep track of it all. And especially when you're trying a new service, like what do I need to do? It can feel overwhelming. It's important to stay organized. And Jane helps me with that a lot. So first, normal intake paperwork. I still use my normal intake paperwork, certainly for a completely new client. If it's someone I've been working with for a while and we've already, done intake paperwork, I will just add on the additional intensive stuff. But if it's a new client, all my normal intake paperwork, because I want all of the traditional consents signed and practice policies and privacy policies and all that. And I already have the package all set up and automated in Jane, so it's easy to send it directly to a new client. I do have a couple extra sentences in my normal consents that mention intensives, and that if you're doing an intensive, there will be some additional forms to complete. And of course, I also send them a good faith estimate with the costs of their intensive broken down very clearly. So that's all in that normal intake paperwork. And so if it's a client that I've already worked with and who's already signed consents, the forms that exist already have that, the content about intensives there, so they've already signed that. I'll draw their attention to it when I send them the new intensive specific paperwork. And if I've already sent them a good faith estimate for, normal weekly therapy, I'm going to send them an additional one that's just for the intensive with the intensive costs in there. So that's one, normal intake paperwork. All this is in Jane. Number 2, my agreement to engage in an intensive. So this is only for intensive clients, right? And this is a pretty lengthy document, just a couple of pages, and there's a fair amount of important information in it, which is why I go over it really carefully with clients. It gives a lot of detail about what the intensive entails, any inherent risks, the timeline of the intensive, the fact that I don't guarantee outcomes. Of course, that's important. And then some legal language that protects me, protects them. And very importantly, it talks about the fee of the intensive, the payment structure, my deposit policy, what I do about cancellations and rescheduling for intensives. This is up to, these policies, of course, are up to the individual therapist to decide. And I want you to be careful and feel confident and secure in what you decide, and not just what you think you should have in there or what you think will be palatable to clients, right? This is something that I lead all coaching clients through, this process of figuring out not only their fee structure in a way that's actually supportive of them as the therapist, but also the cancellation policy, their deposit, how they get paid and when do they run the card for the client, so that, the policy works for them and is protecting the therapist and the client, right? Because if you're putting aside a lot of time in your schedule for an intensive, that's time that you can't fill up with other clients. So you want to be really sure that you're protecting your own time and your own income. Be sure to check out, of course, all your policies with your lawyer. Make sure that the language you have is all legally correct in your state, your country, your county, whatever you need, your licensing board, all that stuff. So that's That's the agreement to engage in an intensive. And of course, this is something that I provide for you. If you do any coaching with me, you'll get all these forms to use and adapt as you see fit. I also include releases for other care providers, which is of course so helpful for follow-up care, for quality of care, and I often talk about this, for future referrals and relationship building with referral sources. You do want to connect with those other providers. An intensive is a big deal, and a client is coming to you because they want to do something that's a big deal, right? So it's very important that you are getting, in touch with those other care providers and letting them know the work that you've been doing with their patient, right? And of course, if you do great work, which you will, with this client, you want to share that with their other care providers so that they think of you first for treatment that's going to really help their patient. So that's number 3, referral releases. Number 4, I make sure they get my intensive workbook, which you've likely heard a lot about in other episodes. This is what I have clients for intensives complete at least 24 hours prior to our first intensive day. It covers most of phases 1 and 2, and it gets the clients really primed to jump into the work. It provides me with a lot of information prior to that first 5-hour day, gives me great history, creates a solid treatment plan, helps with resourcing, gives me a sense of where we might have some challenges or particular blocks that I want to be aware of as I'm thinking about the work. It lets us get to phase 4 much more quickly, which is, just why a lot of these people are coming to us, is to actually move through some of those symptoms. Not that phases 1 and 2 can't be incredibly productive as well. And I've talked a lot in other episodes about clients who have higher levels, maybe of developmental trauma and stuff like that, might need to spend more time still in phases 1 and 2. And in an intensive, that's actually a really great place to do that in a way, in a really intensive way. So, intensives can work in that way as well. But anyway, you can get to phase 4 much more quickly with the use of this workbook, and the client is really primed and prepped to do the work when they come in. You can download this 22-page workbook for free if you don't have it already. The link is in the show notes. You can also just reach out to me, send me a quick email if you want a copy of it and are having trouble finding it. So that is my paperwork package, just like intake paperwork package. We're not talking about documentation, right? So I've got my normal intakes paperwork, my agreement to engage in an intensive, releases, and then my intensive workbook. So just a quick note about how Jane is really helpful in this process of getting all this intake paperwork together, my EHR Jane. It's really simple to set up and to automate an intake package. So it's just a couple of clicks, and any new client gets all the paperwork they need to complete in one efficient, HIPAA compliant, completable package online. Really easy and organized. So that's one way that I find Jane really helpful. Second is their template library. If you're setting up all your online paperwork stuff, not only can you choose from thousands of other templates that other clinicians have already created and uploaded, right? Like, you don't have to just come up with your own. If you don't have an, if you're still relatively new to this private practice game, or, no, I'm not going to cast aspersions on anyone, but maybe you haven't gotten all the paperwork set up before you've been seeing clients. Not recommended, but maybe that may have happened to you. It may feel really overwhelming. Jane's got it all. Okay. You don't have to make it up out of nowhere. You can go into their template library, see what other people have done. And of course, you can make any edits you want to those other templates to fit your own charting needs, how you want things to be for your clients. So this is really great for those more standard intake forms and consent forms, that template library that you can just use and adapt. And it's also very, very easy to create your own template and share it if you want to, so other people could use it if you feel like that's something you want to do. It's a lot easier to create these forms than in my previous electronic medical record. Not going to name names, but I'm just going to say that process was a big pain, and getting support with that was really hard. It was hard to get in touch with a support team, I would spend a lot of time on these Q&A forums that wouldn't necessarily give me the answer I wanted. And usually the answers were coming from other users, not from the support team from the EHR. So that wasn't great. One thing I love about Jane, though, is their customer support is phenomenal. Starting with getting set up for the first time, like I think it's really intimidating to think about switching online medical record platforms. But I'm not kidding. I had 3-hour-long Zoom calls with somebody from Jane helping me through the process. And they would have scheduled more with me if I wanted them. And they were not, there was no extra charge. That was free. It was easy to set up. I could do it within a couple of days. And you also get 24/7 support by their chat. There's email too, email support. I love using the chat, and like it's like a, you know, it's a combination of like responses based on their library and then also a live person. So it's really, really great. And I can get those answers. I'm a huge fan of that function. And then there's also a huge resource library if you do want to just look things up that way. There's videos, there's how-to guides, really great. So I will say that my go-to is always the 24/7 chat function. I go there first and I usually get my answers that way. If I still have more questions, I'll move on to another, like I'll send an email. But I find that just like typing my question into the chat, I get, you know, what I want. Hey, let's be real here. Sometimes I don't like to be doing this, but if I'm working on something at 1 a.m, which happens sometimes, I would like to be able to get an answer then, and I can. Okay, so back to the paperwork itself. So you could actually create your agreement to engage in an intensive in that template library. It's very easy to do that, to create your own template, which is what I've done. You just copy and paste from what I've provided for you in my coaching programs right into their template formats. Make edits that you need to, like I've said, about the fee structure and all that stuff. You could share this with other clinicians. I think you definitely can. I haven't done that with my intensive agreement, but you could. It's up to you. Really your choice. I haven't done it because, you know, honestly, I like people to, if they want to use it, they work with me, but you know, I'm not going to tell you not to do that. And Jane makes it easy. Okay, so that's paperwork. On to documentation itself. Frankly, I don't write a lot more in a note for an intensive than I do for a regular session. I just use my normal DAP note, and my template for my DAP note I took right from Jane's template library, and it's really easy to use. I just enter everything, you know, electronically in each part of the DAP note. I will say that I still take lots of notes by hand during an intensive. I'm still that person with my own pen and paper. I definitely know people that use like an iPad and an electronic pen, whatever you call that. I'm showing my age here, but I still love my pen and paper, and so I do that. And then, so I have, you know, all that information, and then lots of info for me to look back on, keep track of everything, which of course I shred once the intensive is over, but I have it for me while I'm in the midst of the intensive. I record only what feels clinically necessary in the note. And remember, very unlikely that you're getting much, if any, reimbursement from insurance companies for these intensives. So you don't need to have tons and tons of information in there. As far as treatment plans, I don't use them very much because I'm out of network, but sometimes I will use a very, you know, sketchy treatment plan outline, not sketchy in the terms of suspicious, but like not super, super detailed. And I have the workbook, which actually is kind of the treatment plan. So if I do need to include a treatment plan of any kind, I'll just pull it from there. Another great thing about the workbook is it basically creates the treatment plan for you as you lead the client through there. So that's the actual documentation. And then finally, I've had lots of coaching clients ask how you label the session itself in your EHR. How do you schedule it? What do you call it? Since it's not a normal 45 to 50-minute session, that's usually the default in most EHRs. Well, one thing I love about Jane is that it's very easy to add what they call treatments that you can, you know, customize yourself. Any length of session, you can call them whatever you want. So I have a quote intensive day as a treatment that I've created in Jane with the amount that I charge for that treatment. And the length of time. I block out 6 hours for that. And I just click that option when I'm scheduling the intensive days. So just 6 hours right there in my schedule. It doesn't need a CPT code because, yet again, it's not billable to insurance. If you do want to try billing the first hour of the day to insurance, you can bill that as a 15-minute, 45-minute 90834 or a 60-minute 90837, whatever you find is more likely to fly with insurance companies. And I think some of us know that some insurance companies don't even reimburse for 90837 at all anymore, which is dumb, but what can we do, right? Another reason why I'm like, thank you, no thank you, insurance companies for existing. Anyway, you bill that first hour as a 90834 or a 90837 at your hourly intensive rate, and then have intensive day as the balance of hours and payment amount as another treatment in Jane. And so you just have two of those, like one after the other. And that second one, that intensive day, you're not going to submit to insurance. So it doesn't matter if there's two treatments for the same person back to back. Because I know, some insurance companies would say no way to that for a single provider. So those are the major thoughts I have on documentation and paperwork for intensives. Any documentation and paperwork I use, I share with you in my individual and group coaching programs, because it can feel like a lot to come up with on your own. And I'm really glad to have switched my EMR in the past year to Jane because it's made all this so easy, not to mention cheaper. The cost transparency with Jane is incredible. You know exactly what you're paying, no sneaky add-ons, and I'm grandfathered into the price that I signed up with. No more sneaky price hikes that I can't object to. Probably know some of you may have had that experience before. That was what finally made me switch. I was like, I'm done with these price hikes. No sneaky price hikes that I can't object to, right? If you're interested in switching to Jane after you've heard me talk about how I use it, you can use my code Carolyn1MO, all caps, so CAROLYN, number 1MO, for a 1 month grace period at sign up. If you're not ready to sign up yet, but you want to learn more, I've included in the show notes a link to book a demo with the amazing Jane support team. No commitment, but just to chat with them. I found that first meeting so helpful and really, really made it feel like this switch is doable. I know it can feel like a lot to switch your EMR, but I can't tell you how easy it was and how glad I am that I finally decided to do that. So that's my little kind of spiel about paperwork, documentation. Of course, I can support you with any of this through my coaching programs. I hope that was helpful, a very practical episode about questions that I do get a lot. Those little details do matter when you're thinking about making a big switch in a service you offer. It can feel intimidating. So I hope this helped a little bit. Thank you so much for listening, as always, to this episode, and I will talk to you all next week. Have a great week, everyone.